Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here, bringing you my latest episode of the Lower Decks Deep Dive. This is for last week's episode, Much Ado About Boimler. I do apologize for the lateness of this video. I've had a kind of stressful week, but this one's maybe a little bit more of a stripped down version of the deep dive than you're used to getting, but here it is. Regardless, these are all of the canon connections and Easter eggs that I found from this episode of Lower Decks, the 7th of the series. So we've only got 3 to go after this, which is crazy to think about. So I hope you enjoy this, and without further ado, here we go. During the teaser of the episode, Tendi introduces us to the dog, her genetically engineered, built from scratch life form. Interestingly, the Technobabble she uses to describe how she edited the dog's genes comes from real-life CRISPR technology. The Technobabble here is really on point, and I love that these references are made to what would be a future extrapolation of real-world technologies. Captain Freeman, Lieutenant Shax, and Commander Ransom are assigned to a top-secret mission. This is the first of a number of references to the classic TNG two-parter Chain of Command. In that episode, Captain Picard, Dr. Crusher, and Lieutenant Worf were all assigned to undercover operations on the Cardassian world of Celtris III. There's another Cardassian connection in this episode with regards to this mission. The seeds that Captain Ransom's team may be called upon to plant at any time are called roulotte seeds. Roulotte seeds would seem to be a Cardassian foodstuff. It was first mentioned by Major Kira in the Deep Space Nine episode, The Homecoming. Continuing the parallels to Chain of Command, in order to replace Captain Freeman and her team aboard the Cerritos, we get introduced to Captain Ramsay, who brings her team aboard. She is a replacement captain, much like Edward Jellicoe was in Chain of Command. Captain Jellicoe is even directly referenced by Mariner when she's bemoaning the fact that they will be getting a replacement captain. Speaking of Captain Ramsay, we get introduced to the crew that she brings aboard. The 3 officers that she brings with her are a Trill, a Vulcan, and contrary to what a lot of people thought online, this person is not a member of Jayla's species from Star Trek Beyond, but rather a Rigelian. We've seen members of this species in Star Trek Enterprise, and they are an option for a Federation character in Star Trek Online. While testing Rutherford's new transporter apparatus, Boimler is accidentally left 1 Millicochran out of phase. A Millicochran is a unit of subspace distortion and is referenced in many episodes among various series of Star Trek. It is of course named for famed warp pioneer Zephram Cochrane. Due to Boimler's condition, Dr. T'Ana refers him to Division 14. Fearing that this is actually the Time Travel Police, Dr. T'Ana assures him that they are not. The Time Travel Police would seem to be a reference to the Department of Temporal Investigations, a Federation division that investigates temporal incursions. We saw representatives of the Department of Temporal Investigations in the Deep Space Nine episode Trials and Tribulations. There's also an excellent series of novels by Christopher L. Bennett that details the exploits of this Federation bureaucratic group. While I've commented on the knickknacks on Captain Freeman's shelf before, we get a further view of some that we haven't seen before, most notably this, a Gorn figure. The Gorn, of course, were the reptilian species that faced off against Captain Kirk in the classic TOS episode Arena. Let's talk a little bit about ship names. The starship that transports Boimler to Division 14's The Farm is called the USS Osler. This would seem to be named after Canadian physician William Osler, one of the founding professors of Johns Hopkins Hospital. He also was responsible for creating the first residency program for training of physicians, and he was the first to bring medical students out of the lecture hall and into the nation's hospitals. Later in the episode, we encounter the USS Rubido, another California-class starship, this time with the command colors adorning its hull. Like other ships of the California class, the Rubido is named for a community in California, specifically Rubido, which is an unincorporated community in Riverside County. When Boimler, Tendi, and the dog board the Osler, they meet the Division 14 medical specialist. This gentleman, whose name we never learn, is an Edosian, much like Eric's, the navigator of the Enterprise in Star Trek the Animated Series. Never really seen outside of the animated series in canon Star Trek, the Edosians have always been kind of an interest of mine, and I always really hoped that we would see one in live-action Trek, but I'll settle for seeing one in animated form once again. This was a lovely nod to that character and the animated series. Aboard the Osler, we meet a number of the people with medical cases being transported to the farm. We have this gentleman who is undergoing both rapid aging and de-aging at the same time. Rapid aging has been seen many times in Star Trek, of course, most notably in the original series The Deadly Years. We also saw it in Unnatural Selection in TNG and Scientific Method in Voyager. De-aging was seen most prominently in the TNG episode Rascals. We also see a few patients who have endured delta radiation, much like Captain Christopher Pike, as seen in the TOS two-parter The Menagerie, parts 1 and 2, and of course the wheelchairs that they are fitted with bear a very striking resemblance to the one from those episodes. We also see a victim of a transporter accident combining two people. This doesn't quite result in the same thing that we got in the episode 2 Vix, but that is the closest that I could find to this particular malady. And of course we meet Anthony, who would appear to be a victim of Warp 10, quote, accelerated evolution, as seen in the famous/infamous episode Threshold from Star Trek Voyager. In that episode, Captain Catherine Janeway and Tom Paris both hyper-evolved, apparently, into these creatures and gave birth to a number of offspring. And finally, I want to highlight this particular individual whose head has seemed to have turned into a crescent moon shape. This is not a reference to anything in Star Trek before, but I would surmise is a reference to the character of Mac Tonight from the 1980s McDonald's commercials. Interestingly, this character was played by Doug Jones, who currently stars as Saru on Star Trek Discovery. Captain Ramsay refers to her Vulcan officer using Vulcan Jiu-Jitsu against a number of Borg. Vulcan Jiu-Jitsu may be a reference to the Vulcan martial art of Susmana or something similar. Susmana was first seen in the Enterprise episode Marauders and was also referenced later in Star Trek Discovery. The crew talks about a beloved professor at Starfleet Academy, calling him Saul Rubinek. This may be a reference to actor Saul Rubinek, who played Kivas Fajo in the TNG episode The Most Toys. It's not clear if this is in fact a reference to this individual, or if this is a coincidence, but the names are really too close to ignore. When the Cerritos catches up with the USS Rubido, Captain Ramsay references her captain, Captain Dayton. To some Star Trek fans, that name may be familiar, as one of the most famous Star Trek novelists is, of course, Dayton Ward. However, on his personal Twitter, Dayton has assured us that this is not a reference to him, but I did think it was fun to point out nonetheless. And finally, in true Star Trek tradition, the creature that has invaded the USS Rubido is determined to be peaceful and merely in search of a home. A lot of people have speculated that this is the same creature as the jellies that we see at the end of the TNG pilot episode Encounter at Farpoint. However, I would maintain there are a number of significant differences between those creatures, and in fact, Captain Ramsay's captain's log does say that it is a creature of unknown classification, so I do not think this is the same sort of creature, but something very similar. Also, I do have to say that in the scenes where they were running through the ship and the tendrils were coming through the bulkheads and grabbing people, I was reminded of the creature from the Enterprise episode Vox Sola that captured Archer and Trip Tucker and a number of other crewmen in that episode. I don't actually think they are in any way related, but I did notice the visual similarities. So those are all of the Easter eggs and canon connections that I was able to find. Were there any that I missed? Please, of course, as usual, leave your comments in the comments below and let me know. Thank you all so much for watching, and thanks, of course, to the Patreon supporters for their help in bringing these videos to you. I truly do appreciate it. To everyone else, of course, as usual, thank you so much for watching, and welcome to a few new subscribers this week. So thank you for subscribing to Kertrats Productions. I hope you liked this video, and more to come. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, as always, live long and prosper.